So today we're going to define a polynomial and classify them. Okay, so you have this chart on your paper. At the very top it says, what is a polynomial? So the first thing we're going to do right in the center, we're going to fill in the word polynomial. I'll write a little bit big. Hopefully yours will fit in the box. And then over here on the left-hand side, we're going to fill in the definition and some examples. And then on the right-hand side, we're going to fill in facts and characteristics and non-examples. Okay, so this is going to go on the left-hand side of your chart where it says definition. So the definition is an expression that contains constants, variables, and exponents. So constants are numbers. So any kind of, so 5, negative 10, 103, so any kind of number. Variables, we know what variables are. That's our x, y, z, so forth. And exponents. So exponents would be your little numbers. So like if we had 5x squared, your exponent's 2. Or if we had negative 3y to the third, your exponent is 3. So once again, the definition is an expression that contains either constants, variables, and exponents. Now some examples, right below it in the box that says examples, you're going to fill these in, might be something like pi. Pi would be a constant because that's 3.14. 5 minus x to the 11th would be another example. You have a constant of 5, and then you have this variable x with the exponent of 11. Okay, or x squared minus 6x plus 8. That's an expression that has a constant. It has some variables because it has the variable x. It has some exponents. So this has an exponent of 2. This plain x would be like having an exponent of 1. So it's an expression that would contain all of those. Or sometimes just some of those. So this is going to go on the right-hand side of your chart. So we're going to start here where it says facts and characteristics. So we're talking about polynomials once again. So one thing that's going to be true is that you're not going to divide by a variable. So if you had a fraction, your variable wouldn't be the denominator. So something like that. Our variables have to have whole number exponents. Whole number exponents. So that means that you would have something like x to the 11th. You wouldn't have x to the 11th halves. That would be a no-no. And you have a finite number of terms. So that means you can count how many terms there are. It doesn't go on and on. So right below that, in the box below it, you're going to have non-examples. So 3 divided by x is not a polynomial because this first one says you can't divide by a variable. All right, and then x to the negative 3, that wouldn't be part of a polynomial because you have that negative exponent, whole number exponent, so we want positive, no fractions. And then the last one here would be a polynomial, or not a polynomial rather, because notice how you have this dot, dot, dot. That means that your terms keep going on and on and on forever. So you can't have dividing by a variable. You have to have a whole number exponents. Okay, you can't have something that's not a whole number. And you have to have a finite number of terms. So now when you look at your finished chart, this was what you should have. You should have polynomial in the center, because that's what we're talking about. Your definitions, an expression that contains constants, variables, and exponents. Your examples, so pi, 5 minus x to the 11th, x squared minus 6x plus 8. On the right-hand side, we had our facts and characteristics, so no dividing by a variable. The variable has to have a whole number exponent, and we have a finite number of terms, and then our last box, we showed some non-examples. So we're going to look at some definitions. So this is talking about the different parts of a polynomial. So the first one's terms. So terms, the part of a polynomial that are being added or subtracted. So you need to make sure you're filling in the blanks on your note sheet here. So for example, if we had something like x squared plus 5. In this example, we have 2 terms because you have 2 things that you're adding together, x squared and 5. Coefficient talks about the number in front of a variable. Make sure you take that sign. So if we were looking at negative 7y squared, your coefficient would be negative 7. It's the number that's out in front. A constant is a term without a variable. So if you just had a plus 5 at the end of something or a minus 8, it's just your plain number. Okay, your leading term says the term with the highest exponent. So you're going to look at all your terms, and whichever one has the biggest exponent, that's going to be your leading term. And the leading coefficient is going to be the coefficient of that leading term. So it's just the number that's out in front. Okay, and if we ask about the degree of a polynomial, degree is talking about the exponent of the leading term, which means you're looking at the highest exponent. Okay, so now we're going to look at ways that we can classify. So we're going to classify it by the degree, which is the first thing we have here. Remember, with degree, that just means your exponent, whatever the highest exponent is. And then the number of terms, this is how many things you're adding or subtracting. So if we have a degree of 0, that's going to be just a plain number, so something like 5 or negative 7. There's not any kind of exponent there because there's not a variable there. If you have something where your degree is 1, your highest exponent is 1, we're going to say that's linear. So that would be something like 5x. You have that variable, but you don't see an exponent, which just means an exponent of 1. Quadratic would be something that has an exponent of 2. Your highest exponent would be 2, so 5x squared. And then cubic would be an exponent of 3. Your highest exponent, so something like 5x to the third. Okay, now we can also classify them by our number of terms. So if we look at just one term, so that means you're not adding or subtracting anything to it. So it might be something like just 5x or 18. You just have one thing. That's called a monomial. Prefix mono means 1. All right, if you have 2 of them, so let's say you had that 5x and you added the 18 to it. You're adding 2 terms, so that's called binomial. Prefix of bi means 2. Okay, if we had three terms, we might have that 5x plus 18, and then we're subtracting 3 from it. You're adding 3 different things together, the 5x, the 18, and the negative 3. That's called a trinomial. Prefix of tri means 3. And anything that's bigger than 4, we don't have a special name for it. We just call that a polynomial in general. Okay, so now we're going to look at some examples. So the very first column is going to give us our polynomial. So this first example, we have 12y plus 9y squared minus 4. So the second column, we're going to fill in how many terms. So we have a 12y, we have a 9y squared, and we have a negative 4. So that means we have 3 terms. Since we have 3 terms, the next column asks, is that called a monomial, a binomial, or a trinomial? So 3 is tri, prefix of tri. So that's a trinomial. Tri means 3. Okay, our degree is our highest exponent. So if we look at our exponents, our biggest exponent's 2. And when you have 2 of something, or an exponent of 2 rather, we say that that's a quadratic function. Okay, if we look at the second example says 9 minus 3x. So we have 9, and then we have a negative 3x. So that means we have 2 terms. Is it a monomial, binomial, or trinomial? So we're going to say that's a binomial. Prefix bi means 2. the highest degree. So the only one that even has an exponent is that 3x. Well, you don't see an exponent, but if it has a variable without an exponent, that means there's an exponent of 1. So your degree would just be 1, and that's linear. Okay. The third one, we have just an 18, and that's it. You're not adding or subtracting anything to that, just a plain old 18. So that means there's only one term. So one term is called a monomial. Okay, prefix of mono means 1. Your degree would be 0 because there's not an exponent there, because there's not a variable. So if there's not a variable, you're not going to have an exponent with your variable. So your degree would be 0, and that's called a constant. Okay, if there's not a variable with it, it's called a constant. Okay, and our last one, we have x cubed plus 4x plus 3. So x cubed, the 4x, and the 3. So 3 terms. So since there's 3 of them, once again, that's called a trinomial. Okay, your degree is going to be your biggest exponent, which will be this first one, x to the third. Your exponent there is 3. That's the biggest exponent. And when your degree is 3, the highest exponent is 3, you're going to say that's cubic.